I think the lesson in New York City, before but certainly highlighted in the pandemic, is what we do isn't really defending a thing because people rely on those things so much. What we're doing now is defending a person. That's a different motivation. That's really powerful.
And we are rolling all around. We're speeding. Camera speed all the way around.
Hello, Falcon.
Hello, Falcon.
It's great to be with you today. Jeff Brown, head of New York City Cyber Command and Chief Information Security Officer for the City of New York.
Kiesens Phillips, Deputy CISO for the City of New York and Head of Threat Management for New York City Cyber Command.
New York City Cyber Command has a twofold mission. We're here to make sure that the services that New Yorkers depend on, the technology that enables those services, are defended from cyber threats each and every day. And we also are charged with bringing cybersecurity to New Yorkers in ways that respect their values. New York City Cyber Command was stood up by Mayor Bill de Blasio in 2017. The organization is part of the city government of New York. And what we focus on each and every day is helping maintain the resiliency of that technology that New Yorkers depend on across all of the storied agencies of New York in order to make sure that they're not disrupted by adversary activity. New York City Cyber Command has a central mission to defend the technology that enables services to New Yorkers each and every day. What we concentrate on is working with agencies, working with partners, working with allies to make sure that the best technologies, the brightest people, join the mission so that New Yorkers themselves are defended from what we're seeing in the cyber threat landscape. How do we go about this mission? Really, when it comes down to it, we think about the values of the organization itself. The organization can be defined in a simple equation that we like to use. Facts plus judgment plus culture equals trust. All of those things probably resonate with the Falcon community. You have to have facts in order to make decisions, in order to make judgments when you're responding to an incident. You need to have a culture that is embracive of all the best that this industry has to offer. And we often like to think of that as all the best that New York has to offer. Finally, if you get those three things right, we think you deserve trust. We extend that trust to our critical partners who are with us, besides us, each and every day in the mission.
So Jeff, we talked a lot about the vision for New York City Cyber Command, and in that we want the vision to be that New York City is the most resilient city in the world. And I think within the pandemic, we really realized that the systems and the environment that we've been building for the past 3 years helped us to almost visualize and manifest, if you will, this vision that we've been thinking about for so long. And I think the reason why I say that is because we've built this environment to allow our responders to be resilient for the people in this city, to bring our expertise in the skill set that we have to the agencies in light of them trying to service New Yorkers in some of the most difficult times. And I'm just really proud of that and the partnership with CrowdStrike, really just enabling us to have confidence in our capability to service these agencies, especially as more workers have gone remote. We've been able to deploy agents out swiftly to those devices to have trust and confidence that those systems providing a service for these New Yorkers were protected. And I'm very confident and very proud in that. And I think with this partnership and with this environment that we've built, we'll continue to try to manifest this vision of making New York City the most resilient city in the world.
I think the thing that's really exciting about what you just shared, Kiesens, is when it comes down to the vision, I think a lot of times people think about the vision as something to achieve. I think sometimes this lesson of the pandemic for our organization has shown a vision is something that you can achieve each and every day, not something that is far off in the horizon. When I think about what we have been able to accomplish in the cyber defense of the city, I also think very clearly about our own organization. And to me, it all revolves around March 13th. on March 13th was when the city itself provided guidance that the city workforce could go remote. And to me, our ability as an organization to go remote is really a component of two things. And all of it has to do with the vision of what a resilient city needed to be and what a resilient organization needed to be and what partners we needed to do that. So for years before March 13th, we've been working on this strategy called Defend the Defenders. In order to defend the defenders, we knew that New York City Cyber Command needed to have the strongest environment it could possibly have. And because of that, we built in the type of technology that will allow us to grab those laptops and go home and work from home. That was an incredibly proud moment for me and a really satisfying moment because as the person accountable, not just for our mission, but for the people of our organization, in that exact moment, we were able to say, because we had a vision years ago to build the right type of technical environment with the right type of technical controls, all of you can go home and be safer, and through you being safer, maybe be safer with your families, with your friends, with your community. That meant a lot to me. It's a really proud moment for me. The other piece of it that I think is incredibly important, of course, is expanding that to the mission. Because of the partnerships we have, because of the endpoint strategy, when we decided to go remote, we had confidence that we had visibility, actionability, and speed to execute successfully our mission to defend that technology that the city was going to rely on from that remote work posture without needing to change everything. So being able to, at the endpoint, have that defensive strategy gave us a ton of confidence on that day, March 13th, and we've been executing that way ever since.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that makes me think of the expanding attack surface, right? So we have more workers remote, so we have to worry about systems coming online, deployment of agents to those systems, how protected are they? Then we have humans who are in different environments. You know, do they have the same security controls, the same security posture as they do in the workforce or in the workplace as they do at home? And then we have to worry about your human, your system, and your network. So that's one thing that we do have control over, right, is our network. Our network hasn't necessarily changed. However, the threats posed to those networks can change. And as we've seen with the pandemic, we had tons of not necessarily new threats, but new opportunities for threats to be posed to these environments. So it's been really interesting to look at the threat landscape and then see how it's being used or how the weaknesses and the vulnerabilities are being exploited for adversaries' benefit. So within our environment, we knew that we at least had the visibility and the detective controls to respond swiftly and accordingly to the vast array of threats that were coming our way.
In your comments, you said the word human a number of times. I think it's appropriate in the Falcon setting to remind everyone that as I think about the history of our relationship with CrowdStrike, I remember an initial slogan, and that was, you don't have a cybersecurity problem or you don't have a breach problem, you have an adversary problem, right? That's a human element. And the other part of a human element, as we defend against these sentient opponents across the table from us, these adversaries, these cyber attackers, et cetera, the other part of the human element that I think the municipal mission brings to bear, which is incredibly powerful and motivating to me, and I think the cyber defense community, is we see now, especially in the COVID-19 context, that the work that we do, like the rubber hits the road when it comes to defending things that people rely on. Technology may be the medium. Cybersecurity, cyber defense of that technology may be the thing that we're doing, the role that we play. But in the end, what it really comes down to is people rely on us being successful. There are people on the other side who are trying to thwart that success, of course. Those are the adversaries. But what we do is defend like what people now are relying heavily on. It could be remote work. It could be learning. It could be anything like that. And in the context of New York City, I think it's very powerful when we think about the health response, but then we also think about what the city is trying to do to make sure its students can continue that incredible journey of learning. And CrowdStrike is a great partner in both those pursuits.
Right. I think what I appreciate about our organization is that we always think about our work as in service of the services that are being provided to New Yorkers and in turn, the residents themselves. We are in service of them. And I think you just mentioned the laptops and the iPads that have been deployed out to students. And that was one feat that we were helpful to be a part of, right? It's because the kids mean a lot. And I don't think there's any conversation where anyone wouldn't say that our children aren't important. So if we as an organization could provide a service and a technology to protect the assets that were going to be used by students in this troubling time where remote school is now something that our students, our children have to get used to, like having one less issue to think about within the Department of Education or even within the households of parents who are, dual hatting, working and, trying to be teachers for their children is for them to have to think less about the security of the devices that their children are using. Like, I think I was very proud of us for doing that.
Yeah, I'm so happy you mentioned that. When it comes down to it, there is absolutely no debate that one of the most important values of this democracy is the education of children, right? The education of kids. And we're parents, we have colleagues who are parents, but I also think you highlight something incredibly important. That's the teachers. It's parents, it's teachers, it's how do you make sure that this moment in time where society is seeing that we need to value this interaction that is educating our children, the future leaders, we need to protect that. And making sure that when the city gave out those 300 plus tablets, that we had a partner in the defense of those assets was a really proud moment for us as an organization.
Yeah, I would say another area that, and this is obviously not a gloating time for us, but I think it's just good to highlight another area where we were able to respond swiftly was in the healthcare vertical, right? So we know prior to this pandemic that having visibility across the city throughout various verticals was important for this city, regardless to a pandemic. It was ever more important within the pandemic because if there were to be an incident within the healthcare sector that was catastrophic for that industry, for the residents of this city, right? We really couldn't have an episode where something of that nature occurred because of a cyber threat. So for us, as you mentioned, to have a partnership where we could safely and confidently have the visibility into that environment and have the detective controls that we do and the ability to respond in those environments was paramount.
And that's where I think it's important to challenge in some senses the Falcon community, because what we saw in the city as we were helping do our part to defend that part of the surface area that's within the remit of our organization, the city government, we can't be remiss to mention that the most incredible allies were really the healthcare sector. Certainly we don't have the cybersecurity mission over the healthcare sector. A lot of them, they operate their own networks, they have their own defensive strategies, et cetera. But when you have a threat intelligence partner that you can really rely on to make sure you're getting what's happening across the threat landscape globally, then the challenge to us as a community is make sure we're bringing that in conversation through threat information sharing to those critical partners. For us, in that moment of time, it was convening calls with the health industry and making sure that they had the best intelligence about the threats facing them, because heaven forbid there be an impact against one of the services they're providing or the organizations that supported those services. Because in that moment and continually beyond, New Yorkers are really relying on that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the unique position that the Cyber Command is in is that we have the ability to see systemic risk across the city through CrowdStrike, through other means. And through the threat intelligence that you just mentioned, our groups will work with the various agencies, not just healthcare, but throughout the city, to keep them informed, to help them make these difficult decisions, to help our defenders prepare for the bad days, for any type of threats that are coming our way. And I do think that we have this position, or we're in this position to meaningfully reduce the impact that could be felt by this city because of the position that we've put ourselves in.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's part of taking all of the events of the past year, but really the continued set of events that have been happening in the cyber threat landscape for years now that we all track, that we're all aware of, that feeds our drive to be successful in our mission, the necessity to be successful, to take all that knowledge and start to really think in a year, 2020, in a year where there's been so much uncertainty. I'm reminded of this phrase that I was taught a long time ago, which is, the proper application of intelligence mitigates the impact of surprise. I say that again because it means so much to me. The proper application of intelligence mitigates the impact of surprise. The key in that phrase is you're going to be surprised, right? 2020 has taught us nothing more than be surprised, right? We don't necessarily know what's around the corner. But if you apply your intelligence, the learnings you have by being involved in this industry or other security disciplines or intelligence disciplines, apply that intelligence, you can actually mitigate when you have no idea what's going to happen next. And that's really what we're trying to do for the city, is build that resiliency. I think about how that applies to where cyber defenders really have a challenge, an obligation, a responsibility, an exciting opportunity moving forward. And that really takes us to a place where you think about bringing society back together, bring society safely back together, bring society back to the things that it values so much. It could be in your schools, it could be in restaurants, it could be in sporting venues, it could be throughout all of the great things that draw people to New York City. How do we think as cyber defenders about our pivotal role in creating the type of safety within the type of technology, within the type of policies that is responsive to the values of the people that we serve, in order for people to come back safely together again? I think that is an incredible challenge for the future and something that really motivates our organization to participate in the landscape that New York will build in years to come. So I just have a simple question for you, Q. What do you think of the phrase, "we're all in this together"?
That's a good question. I think it goes back to what you mentioned with regards to the mission. We're all in this together. One, it's a public-private partnership, right? So it's our allies, it's our partners, it's everyone that we work with, it's the residents that we're providing a service for. I don't think any of us can be successful on our own. And this is part of the reason why we have partnerships such as the ones we have with CrowdStrike and other partners. There's been a lot of talk about public-private partnerships, right? And that's for a reason. It's because we have different services that we're offering, different clients or customers that we're serving, or residents. We have different optics, we have different technologies, and some the same. And I just think, we are all from various walks of life. So the diversity in the public-private partnership is super important. So when we talk about we're all in this together, it's one fight, right? So we all need to move synchronously. And if the mission is to fight off the bad guy or gal, then I think we all need to be on the same page in that effort.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You hit the nail on the head. When it comes down to it, when I think about New York City and the vision of the program that we partake in, the vision to build the most cyber resilient city of the world, we can't do that by ourselves. We just can't. We won't be successful. When it comes down to it, to achieve that vision, we as an organization need to have allies, partners across every single vertical. The vibrancy that makes New York City the city that it is, just like any other city in the globe, any other city that's connected to other cities, any other city that has residents, business, travelers, commuters, et cetera. They are all participants in something that together we need to defend. The better a business in New York City is defended, the more resilient New York City is. The better an agency of the city government is defended, the more reliable the services it delivers to the same New Yorker that might be working in that business. We're all codependent in this. I think the pandemic really has highlighted that without that community defense, so to speak, without key partners, allies, and without really a dedication to the mission objective, we won't be successful. But I think, and perhaps this is a little bit of New York coming in here, I think we will be successful. I think the experience of the pandemic has taught us that just like a triathlete you may have a hard time getting in the water in the swim. It may be very difficult. The water might be freezing cold when you hit that water. There might be people grabbing at your legs, but you're going to turn around the buoy and you're going to get stronger heading into the beach. But when it comes down to it, I think the reality that we're all facing is together as allies with a focus. Our focus is finishing the race, and that means we have to get on a bike, which is a totally different instrument, start pedaling. We need to talk to each other to see how to get faster. Maybe we have to draft each other. We need to get off that bike at some point and start running. But in the end, I have a lot of confidence that we've trained well, we have the right equipment together, if we work together with partners and allies, and we will complete this mission, we'll successfully finish the race, and we'll go on to even more races and more challenges with the strength that we build through being successful right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it just kind of brings me back to the point you mentioned earlier with the threat intelligence. And some of our strongest partners throughout the industry are with the private sector, right? Various members of the private sector in every vertical: healthcare, finance, education, that the speed of the intelligence sharing is crucial for us to be able to defend our responders and our city agencies and residents. And I think it's probably just as strong for all of the participants in the conference today, because I know that threat intelligence is rapidly shared and we all benefit from it throughout. So I would just say that I'm appreciative of the intelligence sharing and what it brings to our organization.
So Key Essence was so right on the money to say thank you to the partners represented in the audience. But I'm going to take it a step further and say, let's all do more. Because if you're attending this conference, if you're attending Falcon, in my perspective, you are part of the team. You are part of one team, all looking to better defend networks because people rely on those networks, all looking to do a part in sharing the information about what you're seeing through trusted partnerships, through a great partner like CrowdStrike. And when you do that, you help us defend New York. And that's a really motivating thing. It motivates me. I hope it motivates the Falcon audience. I know it motivates you, and it motivates our team. Key Essence, what gives you confidence in your ability to be successful on your mission?
Great question. I would say the ability to have visibility is one of the key pieces, simply because we cannot defend what we cannot see. In order for us to swiftly detect bad activity, we need a certain level of visibility into these networks, into these host systems. As we mentioned with the attack surface, it's ever expanding. And, we've talked about building our environment to pretty much have zero trust. However, for us to respond swiftly, which we always want to do to minimize impact and reduce risk to this city, we have to be able to see the threats that are coming our way. And not only see them, but also respond to them. The ability to quarantine or contain these systems if if there is bad activity that is happening on those systems. And with the partnership with CrowdStrike, we have the ability to do that. We have a strong coordination. We have strong incident response coordination and plans throughout the city with various agencies to be able to really minimize any of the impact that could surface as a result of these threats.
Do you want to tell us a little bit more about how you think about incident response?
So I think with incident response is really around the system and the coordination. I say the system as in the plan, the structure of incident response. It's not necessarily just about responding to a particular incident. Within our teams, we try to build out pretty much a playbook based on every scenario that we can think of, and that's where threat intelligence comes into play. That's where the notion of threat modeling comes into play. That's where knowing your network is paramount, because if we know our network, we know our adversary, then we can plan for defense against it, and the incredible ability to respond to those threats and minimize the impact, especially when we want the impact not to be felt by the residents, by the agencies, by your customers or clients, anyone on your network. Your users should not be impacted. They should not feel the impact of a threat. That's your job to minimize or reduce or completely avert.
How do you think about speed when it comes to being the head of threat management?
Speed is incredibly important, right? If you think about speed, It can be either if you detect something fast enough, you might be able to thwart the adversary's ability to leave with your data. Whenever we have some type of event, we always look introspectively. We look at how fast did we detect this? How fast did we respond? How fast did we contain? How fast did we close this incident? And how can we move all of those numbers back? We know that we cannot prevent everything, but how fast we detect something makes all the difference in the amount of impact that is felt by the residents, by the services that we serve or protect or defend. When we think about speed, we have to think about what are all of the controls that we have in place to put us in a position that can allow us to detect in a certain amount of time, right? So that can allow us to respond in a certain amount of time. Just because we detect something doesn't mean it can't continue to spread. So what are we doing with that level of visibility? What are we doing with that detection capability? How fast are we able to respond and minimize this impact? What plans do we have in place? What playbooks do we have in place? How are we using automation to service our organization in effort to reduce the impact?
I might even add to that, where are the partners? There are always times where it's always good to phone a friend, and it's good to have the right friends to answer that call.
Absolutely, and I think our partners come into play in a few areas. One, obviously, with regard to the threat intelligence, working to consistently hone this relationship for them to understand our environment a bit more so they can give us the actionable intelligence. But then two, if we have a very bad day, we know who to call if we need additional assistance. And that goes back to our defenders environment, right? So we built this environment to allow responders to come in, to seamlessly integrate with our environment to help us respond to anything nefarious happening on our network. And this is where we talk about the structure being really important. Help is not helpful when there's no structure. So it's not helpful for you to just show up and say, what can I do? How can you come in and you have a list of things that you can just start giving me actionable results on? So that structure is really important. Exercising that relationship and that partnership is huge.
So listening to you talk, I have one more question, because I started to see this as you talked about incident response. Where's the fun in the work?
Well, most people who are in incident response love chasing the bad actor, right? So yes, it might induce a bit of stress, but I think that is the fun. Right, and it's not to say that we're welcoming any bad activity into our environment. We want to prevent as much as possible. However, it's fun and exciting to find new things, find new ways that adversaries are using their skill set, the skill sets that we both have. However, they're using them for different purposes. And we know that they're always or typically will be a step ahead because they only need one door in, and we need keys to protect every door.
That's why it's great to work with you. Such a good answer.
Thank you.
So when New York City thinks about the digital divide, it's a very simple calculation. We have 5 boroughs, and we have New Yorkers, and every New Yorker counts. And to a certain extent, that needs to apply to a cybersecurity strategy. We need to think of methods to make sure that our mission set goes beyond the defense of those enterprise services that enable great things to be delivered each and every day to New Yorkers that they rely on. We need to think about how to bring things to New Yorkers themselves that helps them navigate away from threats that they may encounter in their digital life, and to build solutions for them that respect their values. That means a lot to us. So when we think about bridging the digital divide, we think about how do we help cybersecurity as a mission set go beyond the enterprise and to people. I think that's the most motivating factor of being involved in New York City Cyber Command, but I think it's a motivating factor for anybody in our industry. In order to bridge that digital divide in a safe way, in a way where people have the services that they need, in a way where it creates greater equity across all different socioeconomic parts of our society, we need our allies and our partners. We need the people who are in businesses thinking about ways to make sure the services they deliver are safer. We need people who work in non-for-profits thinking about making sure that what they do can be relied, that a bad actor isn't going to thwart it, isn't going to subvert it, isn't going to, in some way, shape, or form, take that good intention or that business intention and subvert it, really. Break that trust that you might have. We think about the trust that's placed in us by New Yorkers. It's the most important value to pursue in New York City Cyber Command. But when it comes down to it, every single member of New York as a society, every person across all 5 boroughs needs to have trust as they access their digital life. I also think that creates an incredible opportunity for cyber defenders. As people rely more and more on the internet, we need to do 2 things. We need to bring the internet to more people. That's simple. We need to bring the internet to more people. And we as cyber defenders need to influence that conversation so as that happens, it's brought to them in ways where they won't be the next victims of the intent of the adversary. That's motivating for our industry, and I think it deserves an incredible amount of focus.
Yeah, I love that you said that, Jeff. I think oftentimes we don't think about technology existing in a world where we all live, and because technology cannot be developed nor consumed in a vacuum. And it is part of our world, and it's an amazing part of our world, but it comes with its risks, right? So if we're thinking about who this technology is being delivered to, I think we're all in a better place with the decisions that we make to influence how that technology is brought to the consumer. Because those consumers are the residents of this city, those consumers are the clients of those that are in this audience, those consumers are our children who are vast. They're very high up on the consumer chart with regards to all of the new technologies that are being produced.
I think when it comes down to it, the Falcon community, the Falcon audience can be, in some senses, charged with carrying an important piece forward to any organization that they participate in. And the piece that I ask that they carry forward is the very importance of delivering solutions securely moving forward. When it comes down to it, when I think about the city and I think about its digital future, and we think about connected devices in ways that that interact in every way with every piece of the fabric of the city. We have to deliver those things safely. It is no longer acceptable that technology be built, designed, and then delivered with any known flaw. As an industry, we need to push, because representing New York City, New Yorkers will rely on the thing that technology is connected to, and an adversary will attempt to subvert that thing. And in the future city, the city that is entirely digitally enabled, the consequences of failing in our mission can be very, very severe. So we can no longer accept the status quo when it comes to that technology delivery. We need the partnerships, we need the allies, we need everybody in the community to make sure as we plug more and more on that people rely on each and every day, that it's safe.
That's why I love the notion of community defense, simply because when we're delivering technology to the consumer, that consumer is across various walks of life. But the creators of the technology are not always from various walks of life. And that's why the onus is on us as creators, as defenders, to ensure that we're bringing everyone into the fold that has the right optic, the right perspective to really think about not only the technology, but the security and the privacy of that technology, how it impacts the lives of the consumers that are going to be working with and consuming that technology. And if we do that, I think that is true community defense. And I know that all the audience members here within Falcon, can have a stake in that, So we have an amazing community within cybersecurity. I think it's really just about us changing the focus a little bit and bringing in the various perspectives and accepting that diversity of thought, because it's the diverse groups that are working with these technologies that after they're being delivered.
That's spot on. I think about in New York City Cyber Command, we say that part of what we do in our culture is to represent the very best of New York. And what is New York if not everything?
Exactly.
So when I think about, as you said earlier, the community of cyber defenders, it's a great community. It's a community that is passionate, innovative, driven, but we need to grow that community. Everyone's aware of the jobs gap in cybersecurity. So I think when it comes down to it, we need to make sure that each and every one of us who are already in the community is doing everything we can to look outside the community and to make sure that what we're doing as we're looking outside that community is looking for diversification from all different backgrounds, all different ways of life, people who in their core are motivated by this incredible mission that we carry. But each of us has to play a role in growing that community of cyber defenders because we certainly need it. No, it's very true. As you look at how the city itself has reacted, responded, built in response to the pandemic, technology is at its core. New Yorkers, in many different ways, have had to completely change their way of life. And some of the things that provide those individual New Yorkers with decision support are things that are built by companies or things that are built by the city government, are things that now they're accessing every day. In order to understand where the mission's going, I think New York City Cyber Command itself, but then anybody involved in cyber defense, wherever you are, have to think a lot about where the technology that you've been thinking about traditionally defending, where that technology is being operated, being relied on, being part and parcel of the life of the person that's touching that technology. It's really powerful in New York City because, the city's so vibrant and there's always, something going on, and you enter into the pandemic and the city the streets might be more quiet. But that doesn't mean that the people themselves don't have as vibrant a life. But they've, in many ways, moved that vibrant life to their interactions with each other online. So I think to a certain extent, when we think about the industry and what we need to think about, it's how to make sure that we are helping those people be safe as they pursue the same things, but through digital means, that they pursued each and every day walking on the street. But where we really need to go is to think about the lessons of this pandemic, the values of the businesses, the governments, the communities that we represent, and how to apply those values into some of the big challenges moving forward. When it comes down to it, technology is touching people's lives more and more and more and more. What role do we have there? I'm not sure I can answer that question right now, but I know we have a role. And I think we have to take that role exceptionally seriously. And we need to lead in the conversation.
I think what stuck out to me in listening to you is that we kind of had to calculate our risk with regards to the pandemic on the fly. And one thing that we didn't necessarily have to think about before is a number of inputs that were now present because of the wide array of remote work, right? So not only do we have people working from home, but now they have systems that are provided by the city or may not be provided by the city, and what's on those systems and how do we protect them? And that's what we talked about CrowdStrike delivering or being deployed there as well. But also, how are they consuming sensitive information on those devices? Who else is in the room? Who else is listening to the conversation? What is the reach or the exposure of the sensitivity of the data, of the conversations, et cetera, that are usually in the confines of office buildings, where we understand the risk parameters. And I think those were just items that we had to consider because of the state of play. And I think that just made us think about how do we build these guardrails around this new and expanding attack surface, right? Because it's not just defending the technology, but it's also defending the data, defending, the content via voice, if you will. So it just really made us kind of threat model our environment and our situation a little bit differently.
What you said there, Kiasis, I'd like to just sum maybe a simple thought. As professionals, we have always pursued defending a thing. But I think the lesson in New York City, before, but certainly highlighted in the pandemic, is what we do isn't really defending a thing, because people rely on those things so much. What we're doing now is defending a person. That's a different motivation. That's really powerful. Thanks, Falcon, and thanks, CrowdStrike, for having us today.
Thank you, Falcon, and thank you, CrowdStrike.